So President Trump made an observation about the 2016 race that I want to share with you. This highlights how his political instincts used to be solid. They've fallen off quite a bit, but he makes an interesting point.
But you always pick somebody that's hot, that's going up in the polls, right? Going up. Frankly, I'm not sure. I don't think I've ever said this, but probably Hillary should have picked Bernie Sanders to be her running mate, right? Because, you know, as crazy as it sounds, he was hot. He gave her a hell of a fight. A lot of people think he won, and it got taken away. One thing about Bernie, he's the greatest loser I've ever seen because, look, any children here? No, not too many, but they've heard it before. He got screwed 4 years ago, and he got screwed again. You know, Biden got the nomination, right? He got the nomination. But if Biden would have sat back, and if Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, you remember Pocahontas? Right? She finally faded. She faded badly. But if she would have dropped out on Super Tuesday, prior to Super Tuesday, Bernie would have been the nominee. And I don't know who I'd rather run against. One is super left, the other one's had to become super left. One is competent, the other one is only half competent now, and heading south. He's half competent and heading south rapidly.
I mean, there's nothing better than Trump rambling off script because you get some gems in there. So there are grains of truth. You know, the idea that there was meddling behind the scenes to push Biden over the top is inarguably correct. I mean, that's obvious. So he's right. If Elizabeth Warren had dropped out before Super Tuesday, she had no chance of winning. If she had dropped before Super Tuesday, a healthy chunk of those voters would have went to Bernie and it would have put him over the top. Not in all the states, that's not true, but in a bunch of the states. And that could have changed the dynamic of the race alone. But the real thing is what happened with Mayor Pete and Amy Klobuchar at the last minute. I mean, that's where it really... Because it was, according to reports, it was Barack Obama who made the phone calls to Amy Klobuchar and Mayor Pete and basically said to them, listen, we're going to make a deal. What do you want? What do you need in order to drop out and endorse Biden? And we still don't know the terms of that deal. But, you know, if Joe Biden wins, you'll find out because Amy Klobuchar and Mayor Pete will get some sort of position in the administration. And that is payback for dropping out at the last minute and endorsing Joe. And so you had the consolidation of the centrist vote, and you had the fractured left vote, and then voila, there you go. First time in history, somebody won in the first 3 states and then ended up losing the nomination. And it required that degree of messing around and meddling and working together behind the scenes. It required that. Now, there is still blame to go around at Bernie because, you know, his team admitted we're trying to win in a fractured field. So they thought all he would need is like 35%, and then he wins. That was their philosophy. So you can blame them for not planning for something like this to happen. And you could also blame them for not switching up their strategy when it became one-on-one and not doing the things that he had to do and being as aggressive as he needed to be in order to beat Biden. I think all that is true. So there is blame to go around for Bernie's campaign for sure. But yes, a lot of things needed to come together. You needed the perfect storm behind the scenes for Biden to get, you know, pushed over the edge. There's a little bit of Weekend at Bernie's going on here with Biden. Not Weekend at Bernie with Bernie's, Weekend at Bernie's with Biden, because they kind of propped him up and got him across that finish line. So he's not wrong in a lot of the stuff he's saying there. Just some of the stuff he's saying there, he's wrong. Like he said, a lot of people think Bernie won and he got it taken away. I don't know if he's talking about 2016 or 2020 or both, but yeah, in 2016, I think there was more of a case for the outright rigging. 2020, I think it's more of a, like, perfectly legal kind of coordinating and meddling behind the scenes, which is gross, but still, you know, allowed. But I also am interested in the part where he said, hey, Hillary should have picked Bernie to be her running mate. I do believe that if she picked Bernie, they probably would have won. Because you got to remember, guys, it's not like Hillary won the popular vote by millions of votes. Millions of votes. The reason she lost is specifically because of the Rust Belt. In those Rust Belt states, it was what? Maybe 100,000 or so votes dispersed throughout the Rust Belt states. So if Bernie was on the ticket, yes, I do think a lot of people who were otherwise disaffected would have voted for Hillary and they could have won. Because all of her weaknesses, he fixes. He does. Her weakness was with the base and with the youth and with, like, white working class people. And so, yes, Bernie's record on the trade deals, Bernie's record on corruption, being a fighter, his record with unions, like, yeah, all that stuff was the perfect thing that could have gotten her across the finish line. You know, a lot of people I know who didn't vote for Hillary would have sucked it up and voted for Hillary if Bernie was on the ticket, of course. But they didn't even consider it. That's the hubris. That's the hubris. And that's the personality clashes overriding what's good for the country and policy. But that's the hubris of it. You know, she picked Tim Kaine, the most boring white dude on the planet who has the exact same politics as her. Terrible idea. Across the board. So, some of that stuff he's saying is true, man. It's true, but make no mistake about it. What he's doing is he's trying to exploit the disagreements in the Democratic Party and on the left because he views that it'll benefit him if he does this. You know, he's also just Trump and he's firing from the hip and he's rambling and he's impulsive and he's all id. But he also recognizes that the more he talks about the problems on the Democratic side, the better it is for him. He thinks that by talking about Bernie being a victim, that, you know, disaffected Bernie voters might go vote for him. I mean, listen, all I have to say is if you are a Bernie voter, then it usually is about policy. And if it's about policy, then obviously you can't vote for Donald Trump because it's horrendous when it comes to policy. So he's playing on personality stuff and he's playing on feelings. But I think it'll ultimately be fruitless, but it's interesting he's doing it nonetheless because this is definitely not something you could ever imagine any previous Republican president doing.